Okay folks, what I'm installing here is an uncoupling membrane made by LATICRETE called Strata-MAT. What this membrane does, it basically prevents your tile from cracking due to substrate movements, and it actually will uncouple your tile from your substrate. So this is me dry fitting it. I always dry fit all my membranes first and then just roll them back and hear them down with a premium thin set mortar. So this is my process of dry fitting it all first. So if you're looking to purchase this LATICRETE Strata-MAT, it's usually not stocked in your big box store, so you will have to go to your local tile shop or a tile supplier, wherever you can find it, and get it there. It's usually a little bit less expensive than your Sluter-Ditra, depending what size rolls you buy, but it's definitely a little bit less expensive, and you can use a modified thin set underneath it to set it. In this case, I use LATICRETE 253 Gold, and you can use a modified thin set on top to set your tile, since it has little hydrating holes, they call it. Basically, it's just holes in the membrane to allow the thin set mortar to cure. So what I use on top in this case was LATICRETE 4XLT, which is a medium bed thin set for large format tiles. So those are the two thin sets you want to use when you use a LATICRETE Strata-MAT. Not those two necessarily, but you could use a modified underneath to set the membrane and above. Okay, now anytime you're using a thin set mortar on a substrate, you always want to take a damp sponge and wipe it down. That way you could get all the excess dust on there and give the substrate a little drink. Also, when you're installing LATICRETE Strata-MAT membrane or a Sluter-Ditra membrane, you want to use a 1/4 by 3/16 V-notch trowel, or you could use a Sluter-Ditra trowel, which I believe is 3/16 by 3/16 square notch. You want to make sure you use a right size trowel when you install these membranes, because if you don't, you're going to have lumps in there or voids. So as you can tell, when I'm setting the membrane here, I basically take the flat side of the trowel, key it into the substrate real good. Go, a couple different ways back and forth, and then make your notches. And make sure you don't have any lumps anywhere or collapsed ridges, because you won't have enough mortar where the collapsed ridges are, and you have too much where there's lumps. So make sure you do that properly. And once you spread your thin to get everything just right, you take a wood float. In this case, I like to use a mud float. You get 2 hands on there, and you basically want to start from the center out and just push it. Make sure it's embedded well into the thin set. Then once you get it all on there, you can basically just walk on it and embed a little bit more, and you're basically good to go. Okay, now this is what I really like to do, is skim the uncoupling membrane. In this case, it's a LATICRETE STRATA-MAT with the same thin set mortar I used to adhere to the substrate. In this case, it was plywood. I like to use a grout float. That way you don't have a thin layer of thin set on top of the membrane. It really gets it in there good, and then when you come back the next day, you don't have little pieces flaking off. So I like to usually do this. It saves you a lot of time in mixing a lot of thin set the next day, because these uncoupling membranes, they have about an 1/8 inch thick of waffles in there. You have to fill with thin set while you're setting tile. In this case, you can just skim it, and then you have a lot less to fill the next day. And you're really better off letting the thin set dry that you just put down to adhere the uncoupling membrane to the plywood, because if you don't, and you're going and setting tile and you have to lift some up, make adjustments, you're going to pull the membrane up off your substrate, and you're basically going to lose that bond there. So it really is the best idea to let it dry if you can. So this is just my process of skimming it.